Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this is the M5 iPad Pro 13-inch. I use iPad Pro as my main device outside of working on videos, from everything to shopping, media consumption, paying bills, talking on social media, and much more. Since the initial unboxing video, I've been using it full time and I really love it, but for many there's not really a reason to upgrade yet, so I wanted to share my overall experience. When it comes to the design, it's the same design as last year. There's really not an easy way to tell the difference, with the exception of no iPad Pro listed on the back, or not even a marking about iPad. So that's something that they just removed for some reason. I would have loved to see it say iPad Pro M5 or something along those lines, but design-wise, it's pretty much the same. You've got the same super thin overall design. It has 4 speakers, just like last year, that sound great. You have a microphone, of course, your power, sleep, wake, your volume buttons, the area to charge your Apple Pencil, which is actually larger than the iPad Pro as far as thickness, and then of course your port on the bottom for Thunderbolt, another speaker or a couple speakers, and your pogo pin connector on the back. We do have a LiDAR sensor still, 1 camera, our flash and microphone as well, and overall it's mostly the same experience. On the front, I chose to actually use the nano texture display this year, and I work under bright light a lot, such as this lighting, as well as outside when I'm maybe doing notes and things like that. So for some people it's not the right choice, but for me I really like the overall nano texture display. It doesn't really degrade from the overall display, but some people definitely prefer the overall gloss look. But for me, I find it great, and that's why I went with it again from the M4. Now, when it comes to the display, this is the best display Apple makes outside of an iPhone. It's reference grade and super bright, and may be better than an iPhone other than its overall brightness. So it supports 120 Hz display externally. However, we don't have anything from Apple yet that utilizes that, but through the port you can connect it to a Studio Display, a Pro Display XDR, and use it in full resolution. So 120 Hz externally at 4K. Maybe we'll get a Studio Display with 120 Hz ProMotion in the future, but the display here is just super smooth thanks to ProMotion. Now, we don't have the PWM option this year that we have on the iPhones, so if we go under maybe accessibility and under display, we don't have a PWM option. So we don't have that like we do on the iPhone, and the actual PWM is still at about 240 Hz below 88% brightness according to Notebook Check. So above 88% brightness, there is no PWM, but 240 Hz is fairly low and will bother many sensitive to PWM. However, for whatever reason, this iPad doesn't really bother my eyes, and I'm not sure what's different about the iPad compared to the iPhone, but it doesn't seem to bother me. Now, I do typically use this with a Magic Keyboard. This year I decided to go with the white or silver variant, and I really like the overall aesthetic. Going with sort of the space gray look with the white keyboard. I was using the black one before, and I feel the black one doesn't hold up as well. For whatever reason, this seems to wear a little bit better. Maybe you just don't see as many issues, and the same is true on the cover. So you might see a few marks here and there, but overall it's staying nice and clean, and just wipes clean with a simple cloth with some water, some cleaning solution, and that's typically what I use. So I'll use it with the Magic Keyboard with the Apple Pencil attached to the top, and that's typically how I'll use it on my lap. One complaint about this particular Magic Keyboard, which was the same as last year's, is the overall angle that it's at when it's sitting on your lap often tips backward. So if it's on your lap, what I'll typically do is bring it down like this, and it doesn't seem to tip. It does sort of interfere a little bit with the top row of the keyboard, so that is something to consider. But overall, that's one of the complaints I would like to see fixed maybe in the next generation, where it's less top heavy. That may be some of the distribution of the weight of the iPad itself, though. Now, when it comes to speed and performance, of course, we have the latest chipset with the M5, and if we wait for this to load, it takes just a moment the first time you open it. We have 16 gigs of RAM, as this is the 1 terabyte option. So I did run benchmarks before, and you can see them here. 4,104 for single core, 16,455 for multi-core. That was the initial benchmarks, but honestly, using this day to day, how I do, whether it's Safari, maybe going into YouTube, doing some notes with things such as Craft, or maybe some other applications, I really just don't notice a difference coming from the M4. I know some people have seen a slight difference with maybe working with Final Cut Pro, for example. So you'll see here, if we go in and edit this video, I've shown this before. It's when I was changing oil in one of my vehicles. So you'll see here, if we go back, Maybe I'll publish this on my channel if you want me to. I really haven't finished the video, but it is mostly edited here, and it was recorded with an iPhone. It's very fast to export, it's very fast to work on, and of course using the Apple Pencil you can just scrub through it. So very fast, and of course you have that haptic feedback with the Apple Pencil, which is nice. But the overall experience is really great, but I don't notice much of a difference coming from the M4. So I'm not really utilizing it for any heavy tasks in particular. Now with this year's model, with the M5, we get faster cellular with Apple's C1X modem. We also have Bluetooth and Thread support, along with Wi-Fi 7. So I've turned off Wi-Fi. Let's go ahead and take a look at the overall speed, as I don't typically use this on cellular. I do use it when I'm on the go, but let's go ahead and continue here. We'll tap go and see what kind of speeds we get. So we have a couple bars of signal. I'm inside a brick building as well, but you'll see we're at 600 megabits per second down, which is pretty good. Let's take a look at upload speeds, and we're around almost 20 megabits per second up. So overall pretty good. Just for sitting inside of a brick building, it's doing better than I would have expected. However, utilizing it day to day with normal tasks, you're not going to notice that difference. Maybe you will if you're uploading a video or some large files, but for me, typically it's plenty fast and really no issues there. When it comes to heat, I really didn't notice a difference. The processor's in the middle of the device, and it's inside of that rigid spine, and it seems to be really nice and cool unless you're in very bright sunlight. The display looks great in that sunlight, and of course keeping it bright, utilizing more power, everything's going to heat up a little bit more. But even in the hottest of conditions, I didn't have it give me the overheat message. It did definitely get warm to the touch, but when it was on the Magic Keyboard, you really don't notice it other than if you were to take it off of that and hold it on the back of the device. Then it gets quite warm, but other than that, there's not really an issue. When it comes to battery, Apple says it's good for about 10 hours, and I find that to be around the same number that I get before if you're not really doing a whole lot with it. So if you're utilizing it normally with cellular, maybe 8 hours. But if we take a look at battery usage, you can see here yesterday, 1 hour and 57 minutes and used 31% of the battery. So that's about what you would expect. So about 6, maybe 7 hours using it normally for me, and I found that I don't have to charge it too much since the initial release. So if we scroll back here, go to battery health, I'm currently at 100%, and you'll see after 2 weeks I still only have 7 cycles. So I do find that I charge it fairly regularly, but maybe every couple of days typically. So it gets me through the day, no real issue, but I am not using this full time. I'm often editing on a Mac, then going back to this to maybe do some research, maybe some media consumption, some email, and more. Also, when it comes to battery health, I just leave it here with Apple sort of managing it. I don't put it on 80% limit. And based off of comments on X from my M4 iPad Pro, people that used 80% versus me not using it had about the same cycle count and had about the exact same battery health after that time frame. So really it doesn't seem to benefit very much, at least on the iPad. And you can see those comments here where it doesn't seem to be that much different. Some people are going to, of course, have different experiences. And I typically charge this with an 140 watt MacBook Pro charger. Now it's going to cap itself anyway as far as the overall charging speed. So it won't charge at 140 watts, but I typically just use an Apple charger with it and charge it that way. When it comes to the iPadOS 26.1 experience, well, it's generally okay. It's fairly smooth, especially with iPadOS 26.1. They've brought back things such as slide over in sort of a new way, but you need to use the windowed mode for that. And I actually still prefer it in full screen. It helps me focus, and that's typically how I use it. But in windowed mode here, if we go into windowed mode, we can bring up slide over. So they did bring that back if you want to use that, and slide it off to the side. Bring it back in and you can go back into it. So it just depends if you use that regularly. I find I don't really use the windowed apps as I prefer a larger display for having things windowed. And again, like I said, I like to focus when it comes to using the iPad. So I use it in full screen mode. Now, it is still early on with iPadOS 26.1. I do expect some additional refinements in the future. This one is just running the public version, and it's nice and fast going into things such as Apple TV here. Of course, it has to load in the background, but just going into different applications, going back out, going into settings, music, everything is just super fast like you would expect. You're generally only waiting for things such as your internet to load or download speeds overall. The only odd bug I've had is mostly in Safari, where sometimes you'll be scrolling, maybe you'll go to tap on a different menu, and sometimes it doesn't respond. Other times I don't find this to be an issue. It's less an issue with iOS 26.1, but if I close it, go back in, it typically solves that issue. So generally it's nice and fast, no real issues, and it's one of those devices that's typically just a joy to use. Now, when it comes to future use, I'm getting very close to be able to use this on the go when I'm traveling instead of bringing a MacBook. One app that I need is Pixelmator Pro, and it looks like Apple could be bringing that to iPad very soon. I really need that for things such as thumbnails, but I can use Final Cut Pro with the majority of things that I do, other than maybe some of the titles that I use. I'll have to use something else. But overall, it's very functional, very fast, and the only thing I wish they'd bring back is the typical split screen instead of having to go into the windowed apps to do that. So if maybe you wanted to bring in something else, I would love to have the traditional way of doing that, bring that back in and allow me to do it, but you just can't do it like you did before without using the windowing app side of it. So if you're wondering if it's worth it to upgrade, well, it really depends which iPad you're coming from. If you have an older iPad Pro, this is a great upgrade option, but if you have an iPad Pro M4, there's not really a reason to upgrade here. We do have the same design. We have basically the same feel. You still have the nano texture option, the 1 terabyte option. The base models did get a bump up to 12 gigs of RAM, but unless you really are having issues with it, I'd say it's not worth the upgrade unless you're on an older iPad. So if you've never had an iPad Pro, you'll absolutely love this along with its speakers and the overall usability. But coming from an M4 to this, there's not really a reason to upgrade. Anything else though, regular iPad, iPad Air, definitely upgrading is a nice jump, maybe in performance for you, depending on what you're doing, or just the overall visual quality of the display, or using it even as a secondary monitor off of a Mac, maybe for additional reference work. It's great for that. So I'll continue using this day to day. Typically every year and a half or so they release a new one, and maybe we'll get a new design with the M6. But either way, there's not a whole lot more I want from this other than maybe Pixelmator Pro or something like that. Maybe a different filing system option, but other than that, it's really great. I would like to see text edit implemented directly, but other than that, I really enjoy using it. Let me know what you think of the new M5 iPad Pro in the comments below. And do you use a Magic Keyboard? Do you use a case with it or something else? I'd love to hear from you there as well. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description like I normally do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.